Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a very special review of something that I've been wanting to see ever since I got back into Goosebumps. And that thing is Goosebumps the Musical, Phantom of the Auditorium. Now, this past weekend, I was very blessed and fortunate to have been gifted tickets for my birthday, for my 30th birthday, y'all. I'm old. To go see Goosebumps the Musical in South Carolina. Now, I did not know what to expect going into it. All that I knew was that the house that we were going to be seeing the performance in was performing the show. I didn't know anything about the actors, who would be playing who, and how the things worked, but I got a big education course on it when I went to see it, so that was really fun. And I have to say off the bat, if you're a massive Goosebumps fan and you are fortunate enough to have the play being shown nearby in a city near you or maybe a state nearby that's not too far of a drive, I would make the trek out there to go see this play. There's a lot you need to know going into it, but yeah, I mean, this was really fun. It was definitely an experience that I will treasure forever. As a matter of fact, I have a keepsake of the playbill they handed out, and I had all the actors sign the playbill, and I have it framed. I'm gonna put it on my bookshelf just so you guys can see it every time I make a video. This is a memory I'm gonna cherish forever. With that out the way, let's talk about the musical. So, I wanted to wait to review the musical because it's easy to kind of listen to the soundtrack, which you could not buy at the musical, at least where I was at. The only way to get this is if you buy it online through the Goosebumps musical webpage. There's a way to kind of read along the story of this when you listen to it, because this little book that you pull out of the CD here, they have the synopsis of it that you can read along with, so you can see the direction they were going for story-wise. So that's really neat and all that. But I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to come off disingenuous, for one, and two, I wanted to see what it's supposed to be like in its full form. And I have to say, there were some things I was not expecting about it, and that's going to be later on in the review portion. But up front, I went into this musical for three things. I wanted to be entertained, I wanted to see the production quality and the acting performances kind of bring out what I heard on the soundtrack and knew of the changes, per se, I should say. And then three, I wanted to see the execution of these changes from the source material and how that played out on stage. And I have to say, it was as expected. If you don't know anything about these playwrights who wrote Goosebumps the Musical, Phantom of the Auditorium, it's by Danny Obosh and John McClay. And these two gentlemen are very wonderful, especially in the Goosebumps community. I have nothing but positive things to say about them. They're incredible people. They run an X account out there on social media. They're known to give away things to fans. They're known to retweet you if you support them, or if you have something you want to say about Goosebumps and they happen to see it, they'll retweet it. They're very active in the community, and I really appreciate that. Or whoever runs the X account for them, I appreciate you for doing that. It's awesome to see that creators out there are active in the community. And I want to tip my hat to the soundtrack people first and foremost before I get into my experience with it. If you don't know anything about these people, the biggest name on this soundtrack is Christina Alabado. She's been in quite a few things, and I think she's developed quite a musical career out there in the performance arts industry. So you could probably look her up and check out things that you're probably going to be into. There's also Alex Brightman, Noah Galvin, Stephanie Stiles, Will Rowland, Cheryl Lee Ralph, and R.L. Stein himself that contribute vocal bits in the soundtrack, which I think is really fun. And how that translates to the musical, I needed to know this, and I wish I did. So how it works is, I guess because it's a traveling musical, certain theater groups will pick up the rights and they'll have set amount of days for performances, and they're in charge of doing the casting and all that. And all they're gifted is like the musical sound score and all that. They're given like, I guess, a drive of it or permission to do it or something like that. And they put it on at their house. I guess they can put it on, I guess, a soundboard and play it through the system there. Maybe they can have live musicians cover it because there is sheet music you can do if you rather do that. Or they can do a lot more with the musical stuff if they have the appropriate money to hire whoever to play extra characters or whatnot. And I have to say up front, with my experience, it was definitely a smaller house. They only had the rights of it, I think, for like a day or two. And when I say the venue was small, they barely had enough room for about 70 people in there. And there was not a live band or anything. They were obviously playing it from a soundboard. So up front, it's going to vary where you go and what city you go to. And your performances from your actors and singers will probably vary as well because they're not consistent. So know that going up front. With that out the way, the group I got to see were from the CCT program, which is the Columbia Children's Theater. This is a group in Columbia, South Carolina. They work with local theaters. This one, for example, worked with Midlands Technical College. And I guess they had locals come and try out, and they got the parts. And the 7 parts in the play / musical, you have Brooke, Zeke, you have Corey, Tina, Emil, the night janitor, Brian, and Miss Walker. And I have all 7 of their autographs on this playbill here. And I don't know all their names. Some of them wrote their names, like one lady's name is Rachel, one's name is Sadie, one's name is Liv, one guy's name is Alex. I'm sure they're all nice people. They all did great performances, but yeah. So that's what you need to expect if you're going to go see it. Now, if you're here to hear about how does the story fare, or how does the story grip throughout the experience? Well, I'll give you a brief synopsis because there is changes to the source material. You have to know this going into it. This is a play made for children's theaters, so obviously the source material is even more condensed and kid-friendly than its book counterpart. So I'll honestly just be upfront with this. The scary parts of the Phantom of the Auditorium book, or even the classic episode, are cut out of this. And there's some tweaks to make it more family friendly. And I can see people not liking that up front, the changes, at least on paper, of what they added here. But I do think that there is some saving graces with that, and I'll get into that in the review portion. But nonetheless, the story starts off like the book, right? You have Brooke and Zeke, they're 2 friends, and they are excited to be auditioning for this play called The Phantom. And The Phantom goes back 70 plus years, and the teacher, Miss Walker, actually had her great-grandmother was the person behind, I guess, instrumentalizing the play way back in the school's history to put on a production. But there was a tragedy that happened, and she doesn't want to spill what the tragedy is to the kids, but Tina, who's a character in the story, she's also trying it out. She wants to have the story aired out and clear, which obviously the kids get freaked out. This petrifies Corey a little bit. And the group, I guess the main 4 characters you have to care about in the musical are Corey, Tina, Zeke, and Brooke for at least a good amount of it. And they're all waiting for their tryout results, because where the story starts, it actually starts right before, or like a little bit right after they do the tryouts. And the tryouts are very brief. So if they are there, it's very brief. But anyways, they get the results, and Brooke finds out that she has the leading lady role of Esmeralda, and Zeke, her best friend, has the role of the Phantom. And Corey, his role is going to be playing Esmeralda's father, and Tina's role is going to be the stagehand and the production designer. And she's going to be the backup for Brooke if something happens. So Tina's whole thing throughout the story is that she's trying to sabotage Brooke. And I think that's the first thing you're going to notice about the musical, is that certain characters get a lot more limelight than the book did. And there's a lot of focus on characters like Tina going off in rambles about how she's going to potentially sabotage Brooke or try to convince her not to do the play because maybe this legend associated with this tragedy is actually true. And the tragedy itself is, of course, somebody died during the intended production 70 plus years ago. And the only reason why Miss Walker is doing it now is to kind of bring it back and, I guess, do away with the curse. Well, the kids get to talking and they think that this curse is real. And as soon as they start talking about it, this new kid named Brian comes into the fold. And in this version of Phantom of the Auditorium, Brian and Brooke kind of hit it off immediately. They meet each other first before everybody else. And Brooke and Brian kind of have a crush on each other. Like a romantic connection. And that's innocent school way thing. It's not anything to raise a fist to in protest because you don't think relationships should be in Goosebumps or anything. It's very innocent, right? And it's not touched on that much throughout the play for the rest of it. But, anywho, once those characters are established, they start to get these weird occurrences happening on the stage. It all starts when Miss Walker shows them the platform that this tragedy happened at and shows them the elevator key, and they start messing around with it. Once Miss Walker leaves, it was Zeke and Brooke that start messing around with it, and they have their first interaction with this guy, a night janitor named Emil. Once Brian comes into the fold, Brian gets pretty much put with Tina to help do the stage production, but somebody's sabotaging the things that they're making. And this upsets Tina, of course upsets Brian. And then Zeke, in the play version at least, like the book counterpart, is not prepared for line rehearsal. He's not really taking this role seriously, let's just say. And there's circumstantial evidence kind of framing him later on in the musical, like the book, except in the book, it was more built-in suspense. We got to see Brooke's nightmare sequences, and we got to see this kind of breadcrumb scene in the book with a locker out in the hallway of the school. That is changed and condensed down to the auditorium itself, where Zeke is framed with a paint can put under his chair. And Zeke's kicked off the play like the book, and Zeke feels like he needs to be exonerated, so he recruits Brooke and this new guy, Brian, who they seem to have like a romantic connection, like I said, but it's kind of innocent and still played on a little bit. They're going to stay after school, and they're going to go try to look around to see if they can find the real Phantom. And if you're lucky enough in your production, they'll have a Phantom or something that looks like a Phantom up in the rafters, and they shine a light kind of homaging that book scene in there as well. But that plays into the final act as well. When they go down the trapdoor, they are looking around. They see Emil's box of Cheerios. They had this interaction with Emil that's slightly tweaked from the book. And let's just say they get out of harm's way with that. And we get caught up to speed with Miss Walker. And Miss Walker kind of drops a bombshell about that. And how the police don't know where Emil went. And the kids think that the mystery is solved, like the book, which we get caught up into the finale of the musical here, where Brooke is playing Esmeralda the night of the play. Zeke's about to go on stage. He gets abducted, taken off stage, and he's replaced with the Phantom that we've seen throughout the play, bits and pieces of. And then we learn through the changes of the play that a certain character does who the identity of this Phantom is. But in this version, it's much more heartfelt and wholesome than the book was. The book was actually played in more of a terroristic way, where Brooke, playing Esmeralda, was actually fearing for her life given the intentions of the Phantom in that version. In this version, the Phantom wants to confess some undying love for the character of Esmeralda, and that might draw some parallels to the character Brian and Brooke If you've read the book, you obviously know where I'm going with this. And instead of getting that dark-ish kind of ending with the Phantom on the stage, it kind of fades to black. We get to see the play end. Miss Walker's talking with the kids, but we get a somber goodbye from a certain character that we don't get to see in the book. And it's played up a whole different way with a certain reveal of a certain character. And I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to spoil the ending, especially if you haven't seen the musical or if you haven't seen the episode or read the book of Phantom of the Auditorium. But yeah, that's what you're going to essentially expect story-wise out of Goosebumps, the musical, Phantom of the Auditorium. And for starters, I'll start off with some positives I had with the experience as a whole. When I'm taking in the production value, when I'm taking in the acting performances, I think everybody did the best of what they could do. The local performers in my show, they did phenomenal. Miss Walker, Tina, and Emil were show stealers. Brooke, the girl who played Brooke, was absolutely fantastic. Corey, he was a fun comedic relief character as well. And even Brian, who, in my experience, I'm just saying this up front and being honest a little bit, Brian's performance probably wasn't the best, but he was still fun. And I think the actor really leaned into Brian's character and made it kind of fun to see how he would appear in like a musical setting. And he also played a dual role with another character that I thought was really interesting and how he played him. And this kind of feeds into the person who played the Phantom a little bit. The Phantom, in my production, he was creepy. He was done up in that kid-friendly way. They had a Phantom dummy up in the rafters. I thought it had some creepy tension. The lighting of the play was really good. They used a lot of purples and greens, setting the mood for Goosebumps. As a matter of fact, not a lot of people get to speak on this, but there's dialogue carried over from these actors as well. They did pretty good dialogue. They all had distinct characteristics with their voices. They all carried emotion very well. And I will say some additional music that you don't get to hear on the soundtrack is in this. And the additional music is very reminiscent to Jack Lentz's sound score from the 90s Goosebumps show. And I was not expecting that. And it kind of pulled at my heartstrings a little bit when those things came on. It was like making me feel like I was a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, as a bunch of the audience members in the show that I was viewing were. There was a bunch of parents, at least 30-something-year-old parents, with their 6 or 7-year-old kids, coming out with their kids to watch the show. And you can clearly tell that the parents were Goosebumps fans. There was also grown adults like myself, just coming to support local theater and seeing Goosebumps in a musical setting. They were wearing Goosebumps shirts. Everybody seemed to be Goosebumps fans there. And I think that added to the experience as well. So I really have nothing to complain about for production value and the acting performances. Like I said early on, the house I was in was rather small. The stage, you can clearly tell, since it was a community college, they did not have the room for a full band in there, nor the budget, because it was a small venue. Not a lot of people could buy tickets and pay the live performers. So obviously the sound score was done on an electronic board and somebody in the booth was working it. The guy in the booth did a fantastic job with what he was given. The props department, now I will say this as a mild negative with that, the props were kind of cheap looking, especially the stage riser elevator thing. Yeah. And there was like a classroom they made this is how it looked, at least in my experience. They had a wall with 2 bookshelves painted on, which was fine. And they didn't have any desks or tables, but they had just like clothes hanging on a rack. And then they had these 4 bench seats that the actors constantly had to move throughout the musical. And some of those stuff never moved. Even when they did the transitions, when they went down below the auditorium, which all they had was blank gray bricked walls that you could barely make out the bricks with, but they kept like the clothes racks there. I guess they didn't have enough stagehands to move props during transitions. I don't know. It sounds like a mild nitpick, but that was just the thing I noticed in my experience. The props weren't all there, but that's the least of the problems, I would say. I definitely think the actors used what they had and they made it enthralling, and it was still fun. Now, when it comes to the story, we're talking about kitty gloves here. This is a kitty gloved version of Phantom of the Auditorium, which is already a more kid-friendly story in the original 62. Pretty much every frightening scene I can think of in the book was taken out. Brooke's nightmare sequences at her home, there's none of that stuff with Brooke going to her house or anything. And all the phone calls with Zeke, that's axed out. And to be honest, they're trying to condense the story into, a budget-friendly play. I can get that. So I'm not too hard on that. But they also get rid of some really creepy, suspenseful stuff. At least dealing with the lockers and that iconic hallway scene that we see in the book and the classic 90s show episode and how creepy that was played up. They didn't really have that here. And the last scary thing I could think about the book is the finale at the play with Brooke playing Esmeralda, and then we have this unknown phantom coming on stage trying to pull Brooke to her death, essentially. That's taken out and replaced with a more wholesome, lighthearted thing, which I'm not too convinced that was the good move here, but I can totally see the direction they were going with, because they were trying to make something for a way younger audience, and plus they added this relationship in the story that's not prevalent, which is another thing I can appreciate about the story, is some added things that they do differently. And the big things that they do differently are Brooks and Brian's relationship being more romantic centered and giving Tina more of a spotlight. Other than that, that's basically the changes in the story, and it's give or take. I am well above the target audience for this musical / play. I know that younger kids are going to have a lot of enjoyment with this. I can definitely see, as I was watching the musical, younger kids were getting into the vibes. Some kids were getting scared. That's what it's supposed to do. As for an adult like me, it was fine. The product in terms of story, it was wholesome. Not what I come to for Goosebumps, but it was nice. It was rather nice. And I'm just being honest. That's just how it is. So all that put together, it sounds like I've been rambling for like 20-something minutes about this. I had a fun time with this. It was very charming. The musical and everybody behind the production that I got to see put a lot of heart into this, and it made my experience much more better than it would have been maybe in some other experiences that could be out there of other productions that didn't have the people that understand the source material as much, or not giving the performances their all. I got to meet and talk to all of these actors, and they all said that they love Goosebumps. They all said that they loved the roles they were given. As a matter of fact, which I think is really cool, the person who played Zeke was actually a female actress, and she was so good at playing a guy, they casted her in Zeke's role, and I was talking to her about that, and it was really cool. But yeah, I mean, I had a fun time with this, at least in the version I got to see. I think, like I said earlier, it depends on what location you go to. It might be different for you. But if I'm going to rate this thing fairly, the soundtrack is awesome. And the material that you're going to get here, regardless, is worth your time. With the performances and all the live attributes put into it, I'd probably give this about a 4 out of 5 stars for my personal experience with it. If I ever see it again, I could possibly re-review it and give it a higher score, but I'm just speaking on the one show that I saw on the specific day in the specific town that I saw it in, which is very important and very case specific. I give this a very good. For a kid's musical, You can't go wrong with this. And if you're older out there and you have kids and you happen to watch my channel, you are totally fine bringing your kids to this. This is not that scary whatsoever. If they're younger, maybe like 5, maybe 4, they're probably going to get creeped out. But it's nothing too serious. And one last thing before we send off. Like I said, go support Goosebumps the Musical. You can buy merch on their website. You can go follow them on their social media. Please go buy their soundtrack. Check out the music. You can honestly listen to it on YouTube for free if you like. Check out their events and see if they're going to be nearby you, and possibly go buy tickets and support your local theaters and support your local children's theater groups that put on these productions that, you know, pay to license this. It definitely goes a long way for them. And I love how Goosebumps has been able to stay alive. And not only do these creators, John McClay and Danny Obosh, deserve a lot of credit here for making something that can span the whole country and bring local communities together and, you know, come together with Goosebumps, but they made something of quality here and something that made me in tune with my younger inner child that I have living within me. And that's very powerful, and I can't thank them enough for that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Goosebumps the Musical. Let me know down in the comments section if you've seen the musical live and in color. What's your thoughts on it? How was your production where you saw it? And if you've only listened to the soundtrack, what do you think of the music? Do you like it? Do you own any merch from the Goosebumps musical? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.